Jealous people always ask these 5 fact questions. Friedrich Nietzsche. Opening. There is a particular kind of person you have probably encountered at least once in your life. They smile when you walk into the room, but something shifts in their eyes the moment you mention a win. They ask questions, not because they want to understand you, but because they are searching for cracks. They are probing, measuring, looking for evidence that your success is not real, not earned, not sustainable. And the most dangerous thing about this kind of person is that they rarely announce themselves. They do not walk up to you and say, "I am envious of what you are building." Instead, they speak in questions. Carefully worded, politely delivered, socially acceptable questions that carry the weight of resentment underneath every syllable. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most penetrating psychological thinkers in all of human history, understood this dynamic with surgical clarity. He wrote about what he called ressentiment, a French word he used deliberately, because no single English word could carry the full meaning. Ressentiment is not just jealousy. It is the festering, internalized bitterness of someone who feels powerless against another person's greatness, and who compensates by tearing that greatness down in their mind, and, whenever possible, in conversation. Nietzsche saw ressentiment as one of the most destructive forces in human psychology. And he saw it expressed, most often, not in outright attacks, but in questions. If you want to protect your peace, your vision, and your future, you need to learn to recognize these questions when you hear them. Before we go any further, if this kind of deep, philosophical content speaks to something inside you, do yourself a favor right now and subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell. We are building a community of thinkers, builders, and self-aware individuals who refuse to let small minds determine the size of their lives. You belong here. Now, let us begin. Question 1. But how long have you been doing this? It sounds innocent. It sounds almost like curiosity. But in the mouth of a jealous person, the question, "How long have you been doing this?" is not about gathering information. It is about introducing doubt. It is about reminding you, and everyone listening, that you are still new. Still unproven. Still without the years of struggle that would, in their mind, justify your results. Nietzsche understood that mediocrity has always had a complicated relationship with time. The person going nowhere will always use time as a weapon against the person moving forward. In their framework, suffering long enough is the only legitimate path to achievement. Sacrifice and struggle must be visible, must be prolonged, must be worn like a badge. Otherwise, your success is suspicious. This is ressentiment in its most common form. The jealous person cannot attack your results directly, because the results are real. So instead, they attack the timeline. They imply that anything achieved quickly is somehow lesser. That shortcuts equal shallowness. That if you did not bleed for it long enough, it does not fully belong to you. What Nietzsche would tell you is this: duration is not virtue. Time spent is not the same as value created. A person who struggles for 20 years without growth has not earned more wisdom than someone who transforms in 6 months through radical clarity and focused effort. History is filled with people who built empires young, who created masterpieces early, who changed the world before the world told them they were ready. When someone asks you how long you have been doing this, and you can feel the undermining energy beneath the question, understand what is really happening. They are not curious about your journey. They are measuring whether they can dismiss you. Do not give them the satisfaction of a defensive answer. Speak with calm certainty. The length of your path does not determine the legitimacy of your destination. Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra that the great human being is one who can endure not just struggle, but the smallness of others without being reduced by it. You are not obligated to justify your timeline to anyone. You are only obligated to keep moving. Question 2. Do you really think that's going to last? Pay close attention to this one, because it is perhaps the most psychologically sophisticated weapon in the jealous person's arsenal. It is framed as concern. It is delivered with furrowed brows and a voice that drips with the kind of care that never quite feels warm. Do you really think that's going to last? Sometimes it arrives slightly disguised. Are you sure this is sustainable? Or, but what happens if it doesn't work out, but the spirit is identical? This question is not about your future. It is about destabilizing your present. Nietzsche identified a pattern he saw throughout culture, philosophy, and religion: the tendency of those who cannot rise to pull the future out from under those who are rising. If a jealous person cannot take what you have built today, they will try to convince you that tomorrow will take it away on their behalf. They want you anxious. They want you hesitating. They want the confidence drained from your steps so that the version of you they encounter begins to look more like the version of themselves they are comfortable with. This is the nature of ressentiment at its most calculated. It does not attack what exists, it attacks what could exist. It does not challenge your present reality. It plants a seed of fear about your future so that you begin to self-sabotage, to second-guess, to hold back the very energy that built what they are secretly envying in the first place. Nietzsche's philosophy of the will to power, widely misunderstood, but fundamentally about the drive of all living things to express and expand their deepest nature, stands in direct opposition to this kind of fear-seeding. He believed that the truly powerful individual was not someone who never faced opposition. He believed that the powerful individual was someone who faced opposition and used it as fuel, who looked at every attempt to diminish them and said, simply, "Watch me." When someone asks whether your success is going to last, the philosophically grounded answer is not a defense. It is not a breakdown of your business model or a recitation of your statistics. The answer is a quiet, unshakable inner knowing that what you are building was built from something real inside you, and that thing inside you does not expire. Circumstances change, markets shift, results fluctuate, but a person who has genuinely grown into their power cannot be permanently undone by external conditions. That is what the jealous person fears most. Not that you might fail, but that you might not. Do not let their fear become yours. Protect your vision like a sacred thing. The question is not whether your success will last. The question is whether you will have the courage to keep building it regardless of what small voices say along the way. Question 3. Who helped you get there? On the surface, this question looks like an invitation to practice gratitude. And gratitude is, of course, a genuine virtue, one that Stoic philosophers and Nietzsche alike acknowledged in different ways. Acknowledging those who contributed to your journey is a mark of character. But there is a version of this question that is not about gratitude at all, and you will know it by the tone. You will know it by the timing. You will know it by the expectation beneath it, the hope that your answer will reveal that you did not really do this yourself, that someone else carried you, that your achievement is borrowed. This is one of jealousy's most socially clever tactics. Because in most circles, it is considered arrogant to claim full ownership of your success. There is a cultural expectation of humility that the jealous person exploits with precision. They ask who helped you because they are betting that your answer will minimize you. They want you to say, "Oh, I had a lot of help," so that they can nod knowingly and quietly revise your accomplishment downward in their internal accounting. Nietzsche had profound things to say about what he called the herd mentality, the way that collective mediocrity polices individual excellence by demanding that the exceptional person justify themselves to the average. The herd is not threatened by failure. The herd is threatened by success that it cannot explain away. And so it asks questions designed to reduce the exceptional person back to ordinary terms, to locate a mentor, a lucky break, a resource, a connection, anything that makes the exceptional person's success feel like something the average person could have achieved too, had they only had the same advantages. Here is what Nietzsche would want you to understand. Acknowledging influence is not the same as surrendering ownership. Yes, you had teachers. Yes, you had moments of fortune. Yes, someone believed in you when you needed it. None of that diminishes what you did with those things. The seed does not build the forest. The gardener who cultivates it through years of intention and effort is not simply a passive beneficiary of seed and soil. They are the force that translated potential into reality. When you are asked who helped you get there, answer with grace and genuine gratitude, but do not let the question rob you of your authorship. You showed up, you made decisions. You bore the weight of uncertainty. You did not outsource that. No one did it for you. Honor those who contributed, and then stand fully in what you built with their contribution. The jealous person wants to see you shrink. Let your answer be honest, warm, and unapologetically whole. We are now at the midpoint of this video, and if these ideas are landing with weight, it is because you already sense this truth somewhere inside you. You have felt the questions. You have absorbed the doubt. And you have kept going anyway. That is exactly who this channel is built for. Subscribe right now if you have not already. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Every subscriber is another thinker who refuses to be reduced by small minds. Now, let us go deeper. Question 4. Are you sure you're qualified enough for this? This question cuts differently than the others, because it strikes at something more intimate than your timeline or your support system. It goes directly for your sense of self. Your right to occupy the space you are occupying. Your legitimacy is a person who dares to do what they are doing without first receiving permission from those who consider themselves the gatekeepers of qualifications. Nietzsche spent much of his philosophical career challenging the concept of inherited authority, the idea that certain people are entitled to define what is valid, what is true, what is permissible, and that others are obligated to seek their approval before moving forward. He saw this as one of the great psychological prisons of his era. And it remains one of the great psychological prisons of ours. The question of qualification is not always asked by jealous strangers. Sometimes it is asked by people who were once your equals, who watched you grow beyond the ceiling they had accepted for themselves, and who now experience your expansion as a kind of accusation. If you can do this without formal credentials, without the years of institutional validation, without the titles they spent years collecting, then what does that say about the choices they made? What does it say about the cage they chose to stay inside? This is the deepest layer of ressentiment. It is not just envy of what you have. It is resentment of what your existence implies about the choices they did not make. And so the question becomes a defense mechanism. If they can convince you, or themselves, that you are not qualified, then your success remains an anomaly, a fluke, something outside the rules rather than evidence that the rules were never what they claimed to be. What Nietzsche called the Übermensch, often translated as Overman, or Superman, was not a superhuman being in a physical sense. It was his philosophical concept of a person who had the courage to create their own values rather than inherit them from the crowd. A person who asked not, am I permitted to do this? But rather, am I capable of this, and do I have the will to find out? Qualification, in the Nietzschean sense, is not granted by institutions. It is claimed through action. You do not need permission to build something meaningful. You do not need a certificate to develop wisdom. You do not need a title to lead people who actually want to be led by you. History is overflowing with the names of individuals who were told, loudly and repeatedly, that they were not qualified enough, who then went on to reshape the fields that had rejected them. When someone asks if you are sure you are qualified enough for this, what they are really doing is projecting their own unexamined need for external validation onto you. They cannot imagine moving forward without that validation, and so they cannot imagine how you are. Your answer, whether spoken or simply lived, should be the same. Watch what I build. Question 5. Don't you think you're moving too fast? We arrive at the final question. And this one is perhaps the most insidious of all, because it comes dressed in the language of wisdom. It sounds like patience. It sounds like experience. It sounds like the measured counsel of someone who has walked a long road and wants to spare you the mistakes they have seen others make. But when it comes from a jealous person, the warning about moving too fast is not about protecting you. It is about slowing you down. Nietzsche wrote extensively about what he saw as the tension between the life-affirming individual, someone who embraces existence, pursues their nature with full force, and creates meaning through action, and the life-denying forces of culture that constantly counsel waiting, restraint, humility, and deference. He did not dismiss all patience. What he challenged was the use of patience as a tool of suppression, the way that, slow down, is often said not to help you avoid mistakes, but to make sure you never arrive where you are going before the person speaking can reconcile themselves to being left behind. There is a particular pain in watching someone move at a pace you have convinced yourself is impossible. If you have spent years telling yourself that things take time, that you must be careful, that ambition must be tempered, and then someone in your circle begins to move with a speed that exposes that belief as a choice you made rather than a law of nature, the psychologically uncomfortable response is to tell them to slow down. Not for their benefit, for yours. This does not mean that all speed is wise. It does not mean that recklessness is a virtue or that strategy should be abandoned for the intoxication of momentum. Nietzsche admired discipline as much as he admired passion. What he rejected was the external imposition of pace, the idea that your speed of growth must be approved by those around you, that you owe deference to the timeline of people who are not building what you are building. Your life has a rhythm that belongs only to you. Your growth has a pace determined by your hunger, your clarity, your willingness to act in the face of uncertainty. No one else, not the jealous colleague, not the cautious friend, not the doubting family member, has access to the internal calculation that determines how fast you should be moving. They are looking at you from the outside. They do not know what you have invested, what you have sacrificed, what you have studied in the hours they were asleep or distracted or comfortable. When someone tells you that you are moving too fast, the Nietzschean response is not defensiveness or arrogance. It is simply this: The lion does not ask the sheep to approve of its stride. You were not born to move at the pace of other people's comfort. You were born to find your own pace, and then have the audacity to actually live at the deeper truth Nietzsche wanted you to see. We have walked through 5 questions. 5 weapons. 5 masks that jealousy wears when it is too proud to admit what it is. But before we close, there is something more important than identifying these questions, and that is understanding what your response to them reveals about where you are in your own psychological development. Nietzsche was not interested in creating victims. He was not writing philosophy so that people could identify all the ways they were being undermined and then use that knowledge to excuse their stagnation. That would have been, to him, the very definition of weakness dressed as awareness. He wanted something far more demanding from the people who read him. He wanted transformation. The truth is, every time you have felt destabilized by one of these questions, every time you walked away from a conversation feeling smaller than when you entered it, every time you let a doubt planted by a jealous person take root in the soil of your ambitions, that was not their fault. That was a gap in your own internal foundation. And that is not a criticism. It is an invitation. Nietzsche believed that the truly powerful person, the person who had genuinely done the inner work of self-mastery, could not be meaningfully diminished by external judgment. Not because they were arrogant or closed off from feedback, but because they had built something inside themselves that could not be accessed from the outside. A center, a knowing, a deep, quietly blazing certainty about who they were and where they were going, that no question, no matter how carefully aimed, could extinguish. This is what he called amor fati, the love of fate. Not passive acceptance, but active embrace. The decision to love not just the good moments of your journey, but the resistance, the doubt, the jealousy, the questions, because all of it is part of the process that forges the person you are becoming. The jealous questions do not just reveal something about the people asking them. They reveal something about you. Every time you refuse to be diminished, you are discovering new depth in yourself. Every time you answer with quiet confidence instead of desperate justification, you are growing into the kind of person that Nietzsche spent his entire philosophical life describing. That is the person this channel is dedicated to building. Not someone who is immune to challenge, but someone who is made stronger by it. What you should do when you hear these questions. Now that you can recognize the 5 questions, you need a practical philosophy for responding to them, because recognition without application is just interesting trivia. Nietzsche did not write philosophy for scholars to admire in libraries. He wrote it as a weapon, one that each individual was supposed to pick up and use in the daily warfare of becoming who they were meant to be. The first principle is this: do not explain yourself to people whose goal is not to understand you. This is perhaps the most important thing you can internalize from this entire video. Jealous people are not asking questions in good faith. They are using the social contract of conversation, the expectation that questions deserve answers, to extract your energy, destabilize your confidence, and give themselves material for the story they are building about why your success is not real. When you respond to these questions with long, earnest, detailed justifications, you are not winning the exchange. You are feeding it. The second principle is this: respond from a place of elevation, not defense. There is a tone that closes these conversations down, not rudely, not coldly, but with a kind of serene finality that signals you are not available to be diminished today. A simple, warm smile, a brief, confident acknowledgement, a pivot back to forward motion. These are not avoidance. They are power. The person who does not need to defend themselves is not someone who has nothing to defend. They are someone who has moved past the need for approval from the wrong audience. The third principle is this: use the experience as information. Every jealous question is a data point. It tells you something about who is in your inner circle. It tells you something about whose opinions you have unconsciously given weight to. It tells you something about the environment you are operating in and whether that environment is capable of holding the vision you are carrying. Nietzsche believed that the exceptional person must be ruthless, not cruel, but clear, about the company they keep. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table of your inner world. Some people should remain acquaintances, respected at a distance, not fed with the intimate details of your dreams. The fourth principle, and this is the one that will take the most courage, is this: let their jealousy be a mirror for your own greatness. This sounds like a motivational phrase, but Nietzsche meant it with genuine philosophical weight. The things people envy in you are precisely the things that you must continue to develop, protect, and express. Jealousy does not target mediocrity. No one wastes the energy of envy on someone who is not a threat to their sense of where they should be. If people are asking these questions about you, it is because something you are doing is disturbing the equilibrium of their settled expectations. That disturbance is not a problem. That disturbance is evidence. Use it to the person who needed this today. There is someone watching this video right now who has been carrying the weight of one of these questions for longer than they should have. Maybe it came from a friend whose voice carries more authority in your mind than it should. Maybe it came from a family member whose approval you have been trying to earn for years. Maybe it came from a colleague who masks their resentment so skillfully that you genuinely were not sure whether their concern was real. Maybe it even came from a version of yourself, the inner critic who has absorbed so many of these external doubts that it now generates them independently. Whatever the source, this is for you. Friedrich Nietzsche lived one of the most misunderstood lives in the history of philosophy. He was dismissed during his lifetime. His ideas were distorted, weaponized, and misrepresented after his death in ways that would have horrified him. He spent years writing for an audience that barely existed yet, a future reader who had not been born, who had not yet grown into the questions he was answering. And yet he kept writing. He kept pushing. He kept insisting on the truth of what he saw, even when the world around him chose comfortable lies instead. He understood, perhaps more deeply than almost any other philosopher, what it meant to be seen as threatening by people who had settled for less. He understood what it meant to ask questions that made comfortable people uncomfortable. And he understood what it meant to be the kind of person whose very existence posed a challenge to the way others had chosen to live. You were that person for someone in your life. And that is not a burden to apologize for. That is a responsibility to rise to. The questions will keep coming. The doubters will keep asking. The jealous will keep probing. And every single time they do, you have a choice. Let it diminish you, or let it define you, in the best possible way. Nietzsche's final message was not about bitterness toward the small-minded. It was about liberation from them. Not freedom from the questions, but freedom from needing them to stop before you can move forward. That is the life he was pointing toward. A life built not on the approval of the many, but on the unshakable foundation of knowing who you are, and having the will to become it fully, regardless of who is watching, regardless of who is asking, regardless of who cannot yet see what you are building. Closing. 5 questions. 5 weapons. 5 masks that jealousy wears when it lacks the courage to show its real face. You now know how to recognize them. You now know the psychological mechanism behind them, the ressentiment that Nietzsche identified as one of the most powerful destructive forces in human psychology. And you now know that the answer to every single one of these questions is not a defense. It is a life lived with such clarity, such conviction, and such unapologetic forward motion that the questions eventually lose their power to land. That is the goal, not perfection, not invulnerability, but a deep, anchored, philosophically grounded self-possession that makes the jealous person's questions feel like rain hitting stone, acknowledged, felt for a moment, and then gone. This is the work, and it is never finished. But the fact that you are here, watching this, thinking about this, sitting with these ideas rather than running from them, that tells me you are already doing it. If this video added something to you today, if it sharpened something, clarified something, or helped you name something you have been feeling but could not articulate, please subscribe to this channel right now. Leave a comment below. Tell me which of these 5 questions has shown up in your life, and how you handled it. Share this with someone who is in the middle of building something great and needs the philosophical armor to protect it. Every share, every comment, every subscriber is another person who chooses depth over noise, growth over comfort, and truth over easy validation. We are building something here. Come be part of it. Stay philosophical, stay unshakable, and as always, keep becoming. Stoic Directions.